There has been a fair amount of talk about those pictures and video of billionaire Elon Musk cozying up to President-elect Donald Trump, who takes up office next week. As the founder of rocket maker SpaceX, there's particular interest on how Musk will influence the incoming president on the future of the U.S. space industry when he comes into power. Joining us now to discuss this and more about space is Justus Parmar, founder of Fortuna Investments. Good to see you, Justus. Thanks for joining us.
Mark, great to see you again.
Okay, we'll get to Musk and Trump in a moment, but overall, in the U.S. space industry, would you say it's maybe the most exciting time in several decades?
I think it's the most exciting time in our lifetime. I'm 42 years old. I've never, ever seen a setup like this. It's absolutely fantastic. We, at Fortuna Investments, when we initially got into the space industry a couple of years ago, we loved the setup. The technology is the furthest it's ever been. At that point in time, the valuations were actually the lowest they've been. In the past year or so, I was on your sister network down here in the U.S. on Bloomberg, among other publications like CNBC, really pounding the drum for a lot of different companies, including Rocket Labs, for example, which has had tremendous performance in the last year, gone from $4 to $25. And so it's not just a fallacy or a vision. There's real life performance and opportunities here in the space industry, and we're happy to be involved.
Now, you believe that SpaceX is generally misunderstood. Why?
I think SpaceX is misunderstood in the same way that maybe Tesla was misunderstood back in 2016 or 2017, back in those days, if people recall, the people were like, oh, this is just a car company. It's just a car company. How in the world could this car company be worth as much as all the other car companies combined? But as life turns out, it was never just a car company. It's a data company. It's an AI company. And there's so much more to it. And so, yeah, if you only look at the surface level or the bumper sticker, you think, hey, how is this space company of SpaceX worth now $350 billion? It's doing $15 billion in revenue. It's a $350 billion valued company. I actually believe when this company goes public in the next handful of years, it could potentially be worth even more than Tesla. So there's a lot going on here. It's not just an idea. There's a lot of revenue, a lot of possibilities. It's really literally the foundation and the railroad tracks into outer space. Elon Musk is 90% of the launch market in the U.S.
There are concerns that Musk, because he's so seemingly tight with Trump right now, that there are potential obvious conflicts, and that SpaceX may be favored ultimately with government contracts, and that could limit competition. What do you say to all of that?
I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, right? And so let's Mark, let's go backwards a little bit. Elon's done a tremendous job from every account, getting, not only SpaceX, but the space industry with partnerships with NASA to where it is effectively today. And I think it's a welcome regime shift. And I certainly think so, because, what Elon's really trying to do is, as crazy as it sounds, he's trying to get the rocket up as quick as he can. The Starship, for example, he wants it to fail, not because he really wants it to fail, but he wants to see where the errors are. He then wants to immediately get it back on the pads, give it another shot. If it fails again, iterate, reiterate, and do that as quickly as humanly possible. Of course, it costs a lot of money to do so, but he's trying to get civilizations to Mars, among other things. And so what's happened in the previous administration is he'd have the rocket ready to go on the pads, but he'd be waiting for a signature or a stamp from Washington, D.C. that would slow his progress down by many months at a time. And so what I think, Mark, is in the new administration, the friendship with the new administration, I think that the President-elect Trump is really going to let Elon loose, kind of let the dog off the leash in a certain way. He's the greatest visionary that we've collectively probably ever seen in our lifetimes, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think when you find these great geniuses, you really want to support them and let them run. And I think it'll actually also be a good benefit to Canada as well throughout this process.
I'm curious about some of the other players in the space industry. We know about MDA, the Canadian company. What about this Rocket Lab that you mentioned? It looks interesting in terms of, is it kind of like a pick and shovel sort of company in terms of the components that it supplies to the industry?
It's a little bit of both. So primarily the core function of Rocket Labs, it's a launch company. So it's not dissimilar to SpaceX. So they've successfully launched 50 rockets from scratch, carrying payload into outer space, an unbelievable feat. You got to imagine how hard that is to do. Peter Beck, who's the CEO, who's become a friend of mine over the last couple of years, he's done some amazing things in terms of his launch business, but also that they acquired a business that's other things space that are space adjacent that was acquired last year. And so when you see the revenue profile of the company, I think in Q3 it did over 100 million or so in revenue. Only about 25% of that was the launch business, and then the 75% was the adjacent businesses. And so, yeah, as you said, the performance has been tremendous. It's up 700% since we've been involved in talking about it. I think we're still in inning 1 or 2 of this huge space race and space explosion, this commercial space explosion. And yeah, we think there's really, really good things in the future.
And as you say, we'll get to it another time, but that critical minerals in Canada and the U.S. could be a beneficiary supplying the space industry. Maybe we'll explore that next time. Thanks, Justus.
We would love to. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Justus Parmar, venture capitalist and founder of Fortuna Investments. Coming up.